Hello, I'm Wendy. This is my weekly series I'm doing, Love, Loss, and Lipstick. This is part 9. If you have not seen any of these, I'm getting ready for work. I'm going to put my makeup on, and when I finish putting on my makeup, today's story will end. And I'm just sharing my love story. If you were here last week, I got engaged. And I also thought that I broke up, but I didn't. We didn't. So engaged and planning a wedding. The first thing really that we thought we needed to do was get Steve home from the San Diego area, because if we were going to be planning a wedding, we needed to be looking for a house. So why not buy a house and plan a wedding at the same time? Very stressful and very expensive, but that's where we were at. Most of his work was out in LA, out that area, or the valley where he used to live. But real estate was much more affordable out in the area of town where I was, which would be closer to my work, and of course closer to my mom and my friends. So we decided that's where we would look. And young first-time buyers, we didn't have a huge budget, but this was 1987, so things were much more affordable. We did find a house. It was, we knew whatever we got would be a fixer-upper, but Steve was so handy. I was amazed at what he knew how to do. But we found this house. It was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom in Azusa, which was close to Covina, where I lived. And it was in a really nice area of Azusa, because it kind of Azusa had a reputation of just not being a safe, nice place. But this house was in a neighborhood. It was right at the base of the foothills, and the view was really pretty. And the house was definitely a fixer-upper, but you know, it had good bones. It was 124.5, about 1,600 square feet. So we made an offer and we got the house. And I remember, you know, I didn't know anything about buying a house. I had lived on my own in an apartment when I went away to college for just a couple months, because we got evicted, so I had to move home. So I had never really lived on my own. I lived it with my mom. Steve had moved more times than I could even count. But I just remember one day I was at work, and I got a call from, I think the mortgage person that was taking care of us, the lender. And I remember her saying something like, okay, you know, I need a check for this much money, blah, 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 to cover whatever. And I just remember saying, I don't have any more money. I felt like every 5 minutes they were asking for more money. And anyways, we got through it. We bought the house, and we were planning the wedding. We didn't belong to a synagogue, and we really thought we wanted to have the wedding and the reception in the same place, so a hotel made the most sense. And where I lived, we didn't have a lot of options of hotels that were pretty and had a big ballroom, and we wanted it to be kind of fancy. But there was, I guess it was like a golf resort hotel. It was a Sheraton, Industry Hills, and so it was only about 15-20 minutes from a house. And we didn't have a date set. We knew that whatever venue we found, that would pretty much decide what date, you know, their availability. So we went up to tour and look at it and everything, and it was really beautiful. It sits way up on top of a hill, and it had a gorgeous view, and you could see Los Angeles from there on a clear day. And we thought outside would be just spectacular. But our date was going to be April 30th, and planning an outside wedding in April was going to be, I don't know, it was a little sketchy. You never know the weather. I mean, it really hardly ever rains in California, but it does. So we opted to just do the whole thing inside. And they had a really pretty ballroom. It was going to work perfectly. So planning a wedding for Steve, it was like a production. It was what he did. He was a producer. All the details, all the everything, you know, he was very involved. And I learned pretty early on that if I didn't want his opinion, or if I knew what I wanted, then I knew not to ask his opinion. Because we started out with lots of conversations where I would say, oh, do you like this or do you like that? And he'd say, oh, I really like that. And I'd be like, no, I like this. And after a while, he's like, it doesn't matter what I say. You don't care what I say, so quit asking. Just tell me where and what time to be there, and I'll show up. And I thought, oh, don't be like that. You know, this is your wedding too. And I didn't even realize, but, you know, the time came and I thought, all right, if I knew there was something that I for sure wanted, I wasn't even going to ask him. And then he threw in, because my mom was paying for almost all of it, pretty much all of it. He said, you know, your mom really should have a say as well because she's the one paying for it. And I thought, oh my gosh, now we have somebody else's opinion. This is too many opinions. But he was right. And so my mom actually picked out the invitations, and we went, Mom and I went to taste the food and taste the cake. I told Steve that I wanted him to take care of the flowers and the photographer, just so, you know, he had something to do. But again, Mom and I went to pick cake. I think maybe Steve might have come to that one. I don't remember for sure, but all I know is that he wanted buttercream and I wanted whipped cream frosting. So we didn't even agree on that. But you know, that's really not that big of a deal. It was going to be, you know, a bite. We were going to share a bite. But it was just one more thing that we didn't agree on, for sure. So I asked one of my friends who is an amazing seamstress. I asked her if she would make my wedding dress, which she was like, yes, I would be happy to. I kind of designed what I wanted, and she created the pattern for it. And we went shopping, and I found this lace that I fell in love with as soon as I saw it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. And she would give me and Mom pieces of it at a time, because Mom and I were doing the beading, beads and sequins. I wanted it really sparkly and fancy. But Steve was actually living with us at my mom's house until we could get the house done enough for him to move in there, and then I was going to move in after we got married. But in the meantime, you know, I didn't want him to see my dress, and so hide everything, and he'd have to let us know, when are you going to be here, so we can put everything away so you don't see anything. And thank goodness we had the house to keep him occupied while we were working on wedding stuff. And so this house, like I said, it was a fixer-upper, and it had American Eagle wallpaper. It had, in addition, that was fake wood paneling, and the family, well, this older couple, they raised their kids there and they raised their family there. And they couldn't imagine what we would want to change, because the neighbor across the street was still friends with them and said, oh, there's so much construction and work going on over there. And I thought, oh, what would they want to change? It's so pretty. There were smokers, the ceilings were yellow. And so we were just tearing a lot of it apart. And we got this really cool peel and stick vinyl for the kitchen, or linoleum. And we found there was one room that we wanted to put carpet. Actually, we put carpet in a couple rooms, but we were able to buy pieces, I don't even know what they call it at the carpet store, where they have leftover pieces. And so we found this really pretty mauve carpet for the living room, and this other carpet for the family room. And anyways, just kind of pieced it all together. We knocked down a wall. It was 3 bedrooms, and we ended up making it a 2-bedroom because we made the master bedroom bigger with a walk-in closet, and did a lot of work. Steve did pretty much all of it. He painted the whole inside. We had the outside painted. A client of mine, her son was a landscape architect major in college, and so he gave us a great deal, and he did the landscaping for us. Anyways, it was a really big effort and undertaking, but for our first house, it was really great. So back to the wedding. I don't know that I've talked about her. I have a sister, and sorry. I thought that I would ask her to be my matron of honor, because my best friends are my best friends, and they're all equally my best friends, and I thought I could never pick one of my best friends and not pick all of them. And so I thought, I have one sister, so I'm going to ask my sister to be my matron of honor. My sister was married, and her husband and my mom had a big falling out many years before that, and they didn't speak to each other. My mom wanted nothing to do with my sister's husband. I won't really go into what happened. It doesn't matter, except for we never did like whole family things. And so if you can imagine, my mom adored Steve, and so that really made my sister mad. And she never forgave me for being born in the first place. She's 8 years older than me. So she was the only child for quite some time, and then I showed up. But she was my sister. And so I asked her if she would be my matron of honor. And she got all offended that I wanted her to be the matron and not the maid of honor. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. No, it's called a matron because you're married. And so then she thought, well, who was she going to be walking with down the aisle? And I'm like, well, one of the groomsmen. And she thought, well, I don't want to walk with anybody except for my husband. And I'm thinking, your husband's not in the wedding. And Steve didn't have any relationship with her husband. He didn't want to, but he did say, he's like, okay, if that's what it takes, then I'll let him be a groomsman. He can be in the wedding, that's fine. And if your sister wants to walk with him, then she can back down and be just a bridesmaid. And then we can pair them up so that they can walk together. So I mentioned that to my sister, and she was pissed that she was like demoted to a bridesmaid. You can see why we're not close. And so we got in this huge fight because there was no way that her husband was going to be the best man. And I was trying to accommodate her and make her happy, which clearly didn't work. So I just said, you know what? Don't be in the wedding. I don't want you to be in the wedding. That will solve everything. And so she said that if she wasn't in the wedding, then my niece couldn't be in the wedding. And my niece was going to be our flower girl. And I thought, well, that is ridiculous. But to, use her as ransom. And my niece was 7, so she was old enough to know. And so it was just so stupid. But in the end, she finally came around and she was going to let my niece be in the wedding. I mean, it had nothing to do with her. And she was so excited. And of course, we were excited to have her be in the wedding. Drama, family drama, right? So we were still, going through all the planning, getting everything ready. I mentioned in one of these weeks that Steve had his other mother. So one of his good friends, one of his best friend growing up's family that he spent so much time with, the parents were, they were like his adopted parents. And the mom was super artsy and crafty, and she offered to make my headpiece, and she also offered to make or help us make the centerpieces, which was really nice. We had this idea, we didn't have the internet, obviously. You couldn't Google or look at some of these websites, but there was a lake not far from my house. It was called Pudding Stone. And so Steve and I went and collected tumbleweeds, and then we broke them apart, and we spray painted them and had styrofoam bases. We stuck the sticks in, painted real pretty, and then we had little teeny tiny little lights that we wound around them, and the batteries were on the bottom, and we covered the base with like that iridescent Easter basket grass, or whatever you call it. And the centerpieces, they turned out pretty. And my dress, turned out lovely. And I'm already done. I'm just gonna put some lips on. I thought that I would get to the wedding. We, in a Jewish ceremony, both parents walk the bride and the groom down the aisle. And my dad died when I was 12. And I never really thought about it until we got engaged. And I thought, oh shoot, I don't have my dad walk me down the aisle, and it made me so sad. And so every time we would talk about the wedding and plan the wedding and talk about the wedding, I would start crying. I'm a crier. And then Steve would get mad at me because he's like, every time we talk about the wedding, you start crying. And it wasn't because I didn't want to get married. It was because I was sad that I didn't have my dad to walk me down the aisle. And of course, he didn't have a dad to walk him either, but his friend's parents, who he was so tight with, that man, was going to walk with Steve's mom and walk him down the aisle. So the wedding was all set, and I will tell you all about it next week. Have a great day.